Hi, welcome to this week's quick, or short, I should say, tutorial, Tuesday tutorial. I'm hoping to paint it better than I can pronounce it. And I thought I'd work from imagination this week. I'm Howard Jones, sorry. I'm going to be working from imagination. One of my favourite subjects, and I have worked these subjects from photos and plein air, being out there in these vicinities. I'm very lucky where I live in South Wales to have these places. The scene I'm talking about and I'm referring to here is Waterfalls. Okay, so I'm going to use every bit of information that's stored back there in my memory banks to help me paint this scene. So it's basically a cluster, if you like, of hard shapes, rocks poking their heads just above ground level through the mosses and the grasses, and cascading water that tumbles and weaves its way down in between all these shapes. So there'd be some reflected surfaces, etc. I'm not going to talk too much on this. I want you to try and absorb the things I'm doing, but just concentrating by watching. Okay, so cascade down through here, tumbling down through rocks, grassy colours, perhaps a few verticals to indicate the woodland at the top or in the area, and perhaps all falling onto a soft, bubbling, frothy cauldron of water down here somewhere. So it's not a single vertical fall of waterfall, it's more of a cascade which is changing its direction as it falls through the scene. So the joy and freedom of working from imagination. It's imagination, as somebody very famous said, every painting is a lie that tells the truth. So although they were referring to something slightly different to what I'm talking about here, there's a degree of that in every painting, even I think for those who, obviously for anybody painting in the visual sense, in the two-dimensional sense, you try to create a three-dimensional effect over a flat surface. That in itself is a lie. You're just trying to convince people of what's not there really. So cool at the top here, lots of water. Keep this area nice and wet for as long as possible. Bring in some quinacridone gold, which is a yellow, transparent yellow. I think I'm going to have some fun with the scraping knife here, the palette knife. And there's still evidence of, iron minerals and things if you look into the colour of some of the rocky areas that dot the landscape. So I'm just going to go back to a bit of cool now down here. So if I take a bit of cool red, alizarin crimson, I'll just manage to cool that off. So you don't always have to make a big jump when you're going from warm to cool. You don't have to go from ready browns to blues, you can go from ready browns to cool reds like alizarin crimson. So this is a bit of blue, a sort of reflection of what's up here, but very, very watery. I mean, there's so much water here, I'm probably going to have to take it off with a cloth here because there's so much water. And now I'm going to make this brush that I'm using very, very thirsty. I'm squeezing all the water out of it. And I'll just decide on certain places to soften things off. That's a very arbitrary thing. I don't think you can, this is one thing you can't sort of say, well, that needs to be a soft edge, that needs to be a hard edge, that needs to be a hard edge, that needs to be a soft edge. I think it's a very intuitive thing. You just, if there's any rule of thumb, which I've always said in other tutorials, in my other tutorials, hard surfaces, rocks and things like that, are going to be 70% hard edged, and more organic surfaces, perhaps the mosses and the grasses, are going to be 70% soft edge. That's the only sort of advice, you know, I think we can give. After that, it's good old intuition, which is an essential part of any painter's kit bag. Just using the palette knife here to create some geometrical shapes. And these are a little bit, some of these areas are a bit too wet for what I want to do in a moment, and that is to scrape a rock-like face out here and there. I think I might, actually, I think it might be okay here. Let's give it a go. So, yeah, that's okay. So that is a timing thing. To scrape, make those scraping marks, of course, you've got to be waiting for the right moment. It's somewhere between damp and wet. So imagine a strong, hard face of rock, slither of it, picking up the light that's managing to get through, across there, something like that. And the other thing, of course, is the strata of something to be really mindful of, I think, when you're doing rocky forms like this in waterfalls, areas like waterfalls, and that is the strata of, when the plates were moving across the continents and the rocks were being shifted up through the surface. There's often, you can see a strata that, a line that will start on this side of the waterfall and repeat itself, reappear somewhere over here like that. So just a hint of it there. Doesn't mean to say you can't have another rock coming this way, but there should be some cohesion to the rock shapes that you're making. So play with diagonals as I'm doing here. One coming down across there, reappearing this side of the waterfall over here in the rocks, and then from this diagonal, gentle diagonal, reappearing on this side of the waterfall in the rocks. So they're sometimes perfectly horizontal, of course, particularly when we get to the top of the waterfall, they get a bit more horizontal. Okay, so I've got that so far. I want to try and loosen up now because I've been thinking in very tight terms. So I think I best, I know what I can do. I can create some textures in these areas, in the rocks, the things that grow on rocky hard surfaces. It's just water, just a bit of water tapped into these rock faces while the paint on those rocks is still damp. I can also do this with paint, so let's pick up something nice and bright. A bit of viridian green, a little bit of cadmium yellow, and let's suggest, actually I think I'd like that to be more yellow than green, so I'm going to ditch that little mix that I just picked up and go plumb for something a bit more yellow. So like that, yeah, that's better. That's better. So in we go. So probably in the near-ish future, what I'll do is I'll do a version of this watercolor from a photo, or from my sketches that I've made when I've been out walking around the areas, and show you how that might be slightly different to how I work here. But not much different, because like I say, even if I'm armed with a photo for my reference, I'll really only pick out what I want of it, pick out what I need from that photo. So I did say I wasn't going to talk much over this one, so you can always turn me off. You can always turn the volume down. Incidentally, in my edits, my post edits after making these paintings, I always speed up that drying bit. I don't think anybody wants to watch literally paint dry, so I speed those bits up. Right, I'm turning to a rigger brush here, and my mix is going to be ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. So just bear with me while I do a bit of this, and try not to talk too much through it. I'm looking for some line work through here. So I'm thinking of a couple of trees up here like this. A lot of birch trees in this area, and they are stunning trees, because of course the tree trunks offer so much variation in colour, texture. But I know this painting is not about birch trees, but they're always worth a mention. So turn to a bigger brush now. Just put that rigger brush down for a moment. Notice I'm staying out of the water, areas that I feel as though should be water. I'm just going to put some further washes through here now, create more textures too. There's always a lot of splashing around when water tumbles down through these scenes. water. And now I think I'm just going to, before I actually render the water, I'm just going to go very dark through here. So let's get a lot of ultramarine. Get some viridian green. I want some more ultramarine green and a lot of burnt sienna. This. And I'm going to just deliver some areas like this, perhaps coupled with this other tool in my hand, the palette knife. And let's thread our way down through here. This. And I think we'll have something a lot more organic and grassy looking down here. Just to finish this painting, I'm going to put some shadow. I'm going to shadow one side because we can sort of then create that idea that light is coming from one angle. So ultramarine blue. And I will need my flat brush. So I'm making a mostly ultramarine blue mix. It's just got a bit of alizarin crimson in it. And we'll run shadow through this side mostly. So it's not as if the entire side over here does end up in shadow. It's just to say that there is a direction of light. A little bit of shadow running over the top there, I think. Of course, there will be some shadow over here. Any surface that's turning away from the light will be in shadow. Maybe shadow tumbling down off this tree a little bit. Don't want to get too fussy up there, it's not in the right place. So, and then probably mostly shadow through here. That allows me to show off these rocks a bit better, as they'll be in shadow. I think all I need to do is take a sort of scrubbing brush. This is a nylon brush. It's an acrylic and oil painter's brush. I'm just going to dunk it in the water, drop it in the water to get some water into the fibres, and I'm just going to brush around here like this. Incidentally, this is a painting, I don't always use Bockingford paper. I can't say it's my favourite paper, but I often use Bockingford for these paintings because one, it's inexpensive, and two, it does take an enormous amount of punishment. So I'm really scrubbing hard here to try and create this frothy sort of water of, area of water, tumbling water, frothy boiling water, at the base of this cascade. Cut through shapes that I've made and dry brush upwards into these white areas to show off that sort of water effect. And really, with a bit of simplification in areas, so in other words, I'll just go around the painting now and soften areas that I think are pulling the eye away from the main stage. Just going in here with this brush. I really like using these nylon brushes for this very reason. It's just to scrub out some of that detail at the mainly at the edges and upper areas, because it's further away from us up there. It gives you that sort of sense of depth. And softness. I think there's always that feel of softness around waterfalls. Like that. So, yeah, I can still scrape a few low lights if I wish, in one or two places. And a little bit of white gouache to spatter in abundance, as this is a waterfall. But one of those, I don't use gouache quite as abundantly as this, as heavily as this normally, but this is the sort of painting that I will just make an exception for. There's lots of little tiny highlights where there's water involved. There, and we'll leave it like that. Put the mount around it. And there we have the waterfall from imagination. Hope you've enjoyed this one, and please, if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon if you want immediate notifications as to when these videos get uploaded. And even better, please, if you could, click on the share and perhaps pass them on to friends and colleagues. Hope to have your company at the next one.